Hey everybody, welcome to the meeting tonight. If anybody else joins us, we can catch them up whenever they get in. Wanted to welcome you guys to the first meeting that we're having about the Crawford Street Playground and Walnut Park renovations that we're doing. My name is Lauren Bryant, and I know I recognize several people in the participants, so it's nice to see you guys. I'm the project manager for these really exciting projects that we're starting for Boston Parks. Before we jump into the presentation, just want to go over a couple of how-tos and what to expect for tonight. So I wanted to let everybody know that interpretation was not requested for this meeting, so that tonight's meeting will be in English, although for future meetings, please know that we're eager to hear everybody's voices. So we're able to offer translation and interpretation services free of charge if they're requested in additional languages. So please reach out to me for more information, or if you know you'd like this interpreted in the future, and I can pop my email in the chat for everybody once we get to that point. Megan, do you mind going to the next slide, please? Yes. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the project website within about a week. So if you have friends or neighbors who weren't able to join us tonight, they'll be able to see it there, and we can provide that link. And we'll also be posting it on that project website, like I was saying, and we'll give you guys that in the chat as well. Want to thank you guys all for making it tonight. We know Zoom meetings can be challenging, and we're all a little zoomed out. I know I've got 3 this week alone, but we wanted to thank you guys. We also want to just do a quick virtual meeting etiquette. Just want to make sure that the conversation feels accessible to everybody, and that each of you guys feels comfortable sharing questions and comments. Just please be mindful of others' time so that everybody has a chance to participate. And if, as we go through, you want to set up, or if you want to add comments into the chat, we can get to those when we get to the discussion portion. Next slide, please. So we want to hear your guys' thoughts. That's why we're here tonight, right? That's the whole point of doing community meetings. So we want to know there are several ways that you guys can engage with us tonight. We'll be sharing a short presentation, and then we'll have open discussion at the end. And like I said earlier, if a question pops up into your mind, please feel free to add it to the chat. That way you don't forget, and we can get to it when we get to the discussion portion. But please only use the chat for comments or questions related to this project. So hopefully that's all of the housekeeping, and I'll go on to the agenda. So again, thank you guys for joining us. Tonight, we are going to introduce the team. Then we are going to go into our presentation about existing conditions, and then we'll have time for discussions at the end of the presentation. So again, I'm Lauren Bryant, project manager for Boston Parks for this project and about a dozen others throughout the city. So I'm really excited I get to work on so many awesome projects in a bunch of different neighborhoods, which is wonderful. We've got Christine Brandeo, who is our outreach coordinator. She does a lot with our friends groups and helping us coordinate and get word out to the community for meetings like this. Our landscape architects for this project are CBA Landscape Architects. And tonight we have Megan Tompkins and Jocelyn Wolf with us. And I also wanted to say thank you to Kyle Robideau for being here as well, who is the Chief of Staff for the District 7 office. So thank you for being here. Next agenda, please, or next slide, please. So tonight we're going to be talking about both Crawford Street Playground and Walnut Park. And it's not our standard for those of you who've been to a lot of other parks meetings or any other parks meetings. It's really not our standard to talk about 2 parks at once. But as those of you who are familiar with these parks know, they are so close to each other, just down the street from each other. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about them both at the same time, and that we're thinking about them holistically. We don't want to duplicate ideas. We want to make sure, who uses which of the parks, and is there a difference? Does everybody use both of them? How they work for the community. So obviously there's a difference with Crawford having a field, but we just want to understand, are there age difference within the groups that play at each playground, or are the needs of the communities met with these parks? Or do we need to do things differently? And we'll get more into that when we get into the presentation. So as we move forward with designing the parks at the same time, we'll take into consideration the needs of the neighborhood surrounding both parks. With these projects, we're kicking off tonight. So this is our very first meeting that we're having on this project. So don't worry, you haven't missed anything. We will be having our second meeting in July, and then we're hoping to have a third meeting in August to talk about it. The way these usually work is the first meeting. We're here to listen to what you guys think about the park. We talk about what we see in the park in terms of things that are working, things that don't seem to be working. Trying to get some general ideas from you guys for what you want to see in the park. At the second meeting that we'll have in July, we come back and throw out some design ideas. You know, this is what the parks could be, and get your thoughts on those. And then at the third meeting, we come back with a proposed design for both of those parks. We get your feedback. Did we hear you? Did we get it right? Is this what you guys would like to see here? So then after that, we go into finalizing the design with the input that we get at that third meeting and putting it out to bid for construction. Then our plan is to hopefully bid it late fall or winter of this year and start construction in the spring. Between the two projects, it's $1 million, a little over $1,900,000 worth of investment between the two parks. So we're really excited to be able to do these parks and do such a great investment in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of considerations that go into public park design, which includes the community input, such as tonight, which is really important because you guys are the ones that use this park all the time. Safety and regulatory guidelines with things like ADA, City of Boston priorities, and parks and recreation goals. And some of those City of Boston priorities are things like expanding walkable access to parks, addressing equity. Climate resilience is incredibly important right now in terms of shade and water, that sort of thing. Health and housing and community building. And with parks and recreation goals, we want to have, you know, parks accessible and available to all, diverse, balanced, efficient mix of uses, meaningful and inclusive community engagement, which is what we're starting tonight, adaptive landscapes, and promoting connections, especially when you talk about these two parks, promoting those connections between those parks and the neighborhood is really important. And with that, I think I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Megan to start the presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Tompkins. I'm a principal and a landscape architect at CBA Landscape Architects. Like Lauren said, the City of Boston has hired us to guide the design process for these two parks. I have designed and been through the construction process on several parks in the City of Boston, including a few sort of nearby in Dorchester. My firm has also constructed parks in Roxbury as well. And all other Boston neighborhoods, you know, East Boston, Brighton, kind of everywhere. So we really enjoy our work in the city, and we're excited to move forward with these. Okay. All right. So like Lauren said, one of the things that we always start talking about is, you know, is context. So, you know, as we understand it, these, you know, two parks, Walnut Park and Crawford Street Playground, are very close together, almost like kitty corner, you would say, on Walnut Street. Walnut itself is much smaller than Crawford. Crawford is, you know, close to a few big things like the Ellis School, the Museum of African American Art grounds, and is a much larger park with a field. And obviously, like you can see in this slide, there are other things nearby too. So lots of housing, several other parks, Franklin Park, which is a big one. We always like to sort of show, you know, how far you could walk, you know, from the parks. Sort of one of the things we take into consideration. Where are people coming from? Yeah, and then we usually show a few slides like this that show sort of general adjacencies As you can see, the purple lines are vehicular circulation and generally pedestrian circulation as well. The little pink triangles are entrances into the parks. The areas that are, sort of light yellow are housing. And when we use the word institutional, that usually means schools, or sometimes it means like fire stations and stuff like that. So this is sort of the stuff in the immediate neighborhood to these two parks. And then we always go through this process of site analysis. So site analysis to us is looking at the, at the property, and looking at, what's there, how are people using it, how do people move through it. So we'll just, and I'm sure you guys know, these things, and I'm sure things that we haven't picked up on. So hopefully you'll share that with us later. But so we like to spend some time sort of trying to understand these spaces before we try to think about, how to change them or, improve them. So for Crawford, it's obviously the much larger park. It has a small playground. The Little League or soccer field, I know it gets permitted for both uses. And it is sort of one of those city parcels that is in between a bunch of things. So as you can see on the slide, and I'm sure as you experience the park, there's many ways to move in and out and through this park. And I imagine it's probably like a cut through, or maybe just a nicer cut through. And I also imagine that, maybe the school uses it. When we look at things that are near the park, this is what we look at. All right. Sorry, guys. There we go. Got my ribbon out of the way. Zoom is always a little different. And one of the things that I think I wanted to sort of look at between, Walnut Park and Crawford Street Playground is that Walnut, although it's the smaller park, has a much larger playground. Crawford has a pretty small playground, but is actually closer to the school. So, this is a thing that we can think about, later on as we get into design. And we did want to show just a few pictures. One thing that we noticed as designers and as, as city park officials, is that there is actually a little bit of a slope to this park. So there are paths here that they do not appear to be ADA compliant. So that usually means they're just a little too steep. So if this were a different context, it would probably have to be a ramp, or the path would have to be a little longer to make it a more gradual slope for people to use it more easily. And we also look at things like entrances that are only accessible by stairs. So obviously, if you're someone with a wheelchair or a walker, this can be more difficult to access. These are just things that we look at, improving across the board to sort of fulfill some of those city goals. And then also there's sort of a variety of edge conditions. And like I said, there's all those different entrances to this park. But we also have, a beautiful old stone wall, and then, some chain link fencing that should, probably maybe used to have netting for that ball field. So we look at stuff like that as we, analyze the site. And there's a few different use zones. There's the field, there's the playground, there's a little open green space. And then there's trees around the edges, which not all, but many look to be volunteer trees. So trees that just grow on their own that weren't necessarily planted. All right, and we will go back and talk about this later on if you guys have things to share. But at this point, we'll move on to Walnut. So like I said, Walnut is the smaller park in area with the larger playground. It also has sort of different playground elements. So the Crawford Street Playground only has two structures. It has a structure that's meant for older kids and a structure that's meant for younger kids. And those age groups are generally 2 to 5 years old and 5 to 12 years old. This is sort of an industry standard. I like to throw that in because it's not something that I'm making up or that the city's making up. This is just how playgrounds get designed. So the Walnut playgrounds have structures for both of those age groups. Sort of a bigger general area. There is a splash pad, which is a great thing in the summer for kids. Just so nice to cool off. And it also has swings, which are not present at the Crawford playground. And also, picnic tables and sort of larger gathering areas. All right. Looking at circulation, this one is a lot simpler. Really only, 2 ways in and out with one main path through the middle. And also a sort of nice custom community, it looks like maybe a community art fence with these handprints, as you can kind of see in the bottom right. I'm guessing that was probably installed the last time this playground was renovated. Right.
Just to jump in on that, Megan, if anybody, when we get to the discussion part, knows the history of those or which kids' handprints those are, or whether it was a school-related activity, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So, like I said for the last slide, we have swings, we have play structures for older kids and younger kids, and we have a splash pad. All right, and sorry, I jumped a little quickly, but at this point, we're going to talk about what kinds of things that that we always sort of talk about incorporating into new playground renovations. So what kind of play features would you like to see? The ones that are at these parks right now are at the very end of their lifespan for park play structures, so for playgrounds. And I know that the city usually renovates parks on a sort of 15 to 20 year cycle, and these are at the end of that. And safety standards change, playground designs change, things get more exciting, hopefully. So we wanted to show you a few different kind of design ideas. So things we're showing here, I think the top left is a 2 to 5 year old structure. So it's kind of a little cute tree house. Top right, some musical instruments. They sound really beautiful, like they're tuned. I know sometimes neighbors are nervous about the sound, but I think they sound really pleasant. And then the bottom left is somewhere between like a more traditional structure. We would call that like a post and platform, and a rope climbing structure. So usually great for like bigger kids or adventurous kids on the younger end of the range. And then bottom right is sort of a true climbing structure. It's very sculptural. All right. We also like to talk about other more specific play features. So standalone spinners, standalone rope climbers, dish swings, which are great because they can both be used cooperatively and they can be used by kids with limited mobility. You can get one kid on and the other kid can push, and it can kind of be fun for all. That's one of the other goals that the city has, is to sort of increase access to the playground. So that's sort of getting, putting in things that a lot of different people can use, with people with different abilities. And that top swing with the 3 kids on it is pretty fun. I know there's one in Dorchester as well. Yeah, so splash pads. I know the splash pads are only open for a couple of months in the summer. So generally, we often try to design them as a flush space, so the area can be, used as a plaza, the rest of the year. But there are still options. We can have different types of spray. We can put down bright graphics or educational graphics, or you know, maybe different pavers. I know we've done some permeable pavers at some other parks that my firm has designed. So there are options with that also. And then Crawford itself is sort of a big park. And I think we were curious to know if there were other things that aren't included in this park that the community, you as the community would be interested in seeing. So that could be something like adult exercise equipment. I think that's in both of the top slides, or even just like, you know, maybe because there is the, you know, the ball field, but, you know, could that other lawn area be formalized for something else, or is it just nice as a play area? All right. And I guess one last thing, I spoke a little bit about that sort of like structural play structure earlier, but Walnut has a sort of blank concrete retaining wall that could incorporate, you know, a mural or, you know, something more interesting, you know, than just like a colored concrete wall. So there is opportunity for incorporating something like this into this project as well. All right. Yeah, and also, like, as we're talking about Crawford more so as, you know, this big park with lots of people passing through, are there other things that would make this park feel special, or would announce that, like, this is the spot, this is the park? You know, so that could be, you know, an arch that announces like you're here, you know, or I think that middle image is sort of a wayfinding bollard at another Boston park. You know, it just could say like this way to the playground, this way to the field, this way to the school. You know, these are all just ideas, which is why we're here. And that is the end of my images. I guess I think I went maybe a little faster than expected. So Lauren, at this point, should we?
Yeah, I wonder if we stop sharing for a moment and then everybody can see each other for the discussion part, and then we can always pull it back up if we want to reference back to any images. But like I was saying at the beginning, this meeting is really about hearing from you guys. So, you know, we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an overview of what we see, and to be able to gather input from you guys. So really appreciate you guys being here, and we open it up to you guys. If you guys want to jump in or raise your hand, we can definitely start taking some thoughts and comments from people.
All right.
Anybody have any thoughts? Oh, we've got some
excellent.
hands raised. Okay, perfect. The person who has Francis family.
We can't hear you. Just speak up a little bit.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, my name is Kelton Francis. I lived around this neighborhood my whole life. I grew up. So, and actually, I'm right across the street from the Crawford Park.
Oh, fantastic.
Great.
Yep. So my main concern is the safety with the kids crossing the street and getting access to the park. Because you can't see around the corner really if they're leaving from the park. And the cars come down here fast.
Okay. And so you're talking about on Crawford Street, actually crossing Crawford.
Yep, crossing Crawford.
Okay.
Also too is I would like not to see the wood chippings in the park anymore, because, you know, I would really prefer more of the rubber type ground, you know, no concrete, period. Like, you know, anything that the kids, if they fall, that they can injure themselves on. Like, mostly with that. Go ahead.
I was going to say our standard in the Parks Department is not doing the wood chips anymore, and it is doing that rubber surfacing because it doesn't move, right? I mean, I hear a little one in the background, so I know all the mulch that comes home in shoes and shorts and everywhere else doesn't stay where it's supposed to. So we like it from a safety perspective too. So that's great to hear.
Okay, because that was like one of my main concerns. And then also, can we get, like, if you guys are doing the field over, are we able to have the turf up top,
Artificial turf?
artificial turf?
We hadn't thought about that yet. We could definitely see what the community thinks about it. Some people really like that. Some people don't. There's obviously a cost difference. So we would need to balance what we do in the park, but I would say we can definitely look at it. We have a pretty healthy budget for this project. So
Okay.
if that's something the community is interested in, I'd love to hear from others if that's something they would like to.
And also too, lighting.
Okay.
There's no lighting. It's not as safe to, cross over from one side of Crawford over to Walnut, without any lighting, because you can't see. It's pitch dark, and usually people still have, their dogs to walk or something like that, or just to be able to walk through the park itself to safely, no
Okay.
matter what time of day.
That's good to know. Yeah, that people are crossing through for sure.
Yeah. So people are commuting through as well as using the park.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is a commute access. It is really, it's more or less, a lot of people too use it to exercise, to walk around. I would say too, mostly, in the park, I think we should have some like colors, some flowers at least to beautify the park and make it, feel more of a welcoming environment.
I love this list. It's great.
Right.
So
Yeah.
far.
Thank you. And just to, I know I saw Hazel's hand, so don't worry, we are definitely going to get to you. I do just want to comment on the one thing with the crosswalks. So that is outside the scope of what parks can do, but we do have a relationship with Public Works and the Transportation Department. And one of the initiatives that we have is a joint initiative, which is called Safe Access to Parks, right? So we're looking at getting that safe crossings. So if this isn't one that group's already looking at, I'll make sure to flag it for people. So I really appreciate that input.
Yeah, both parks too. The one on Walnut,
Okay.
and the one on Crawford. So
Perfect.
because,
Okay.
It makes it hard for these kids to have access to the park safely.
Right, and that's huge.
Because
Well,
of the
thank
blind,
you. Sorry, what was that?
because of the blind corners.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
I only know because I lived there my whole life. So
No,
I
that's
bought down the
that's great. 'Cause
street. So I'm really active in the community as far.
That's great. And that's exactly why we're here to talk to you guys, because we could visit the park 100 times and we're never going to know it the way you guys do. So it's really great. And we appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
No problem.
Hazel, you had a thought too?
Yes, I wanted to ask, when were you going to redo the parks? When were you going to start the work? Do you have any idea? And also, I wanted to know if you can put a walking path around the baseball diamond that's I think that's on Crawford, right on the same side.
Mhm.
That would be good if you could put a walking path around it, maybe, so that people can still use the baseball field. Maybe put up one of those fences or something to keep the ball from hitting them as they're walking around.
Right.
If that's possible. I don't know if there's enough room to do all that, but
We
that
can
would be
definitely look at it.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in terms of the question about timing, what we're looking at right now is having, sorry, I know some people joined in a little bit later. We're having 3 community meetings. This first one tonight, and then we'll have 2 more over the summer. We're looking at finalizing the design by the end of the summer. And then this winter, we would put the project out to bid for contractors to bid on, and then looking at starting construction in the spring. And I do have a question because it sort of came up with both of you guys that were just speaking. Hazel, you were talking about the walking loop, and I know the gentleman earlier was talking about exercising, people use the park for exercising. I'm curious what people would think about exercise equipment in adult exercise equipment, because that's not something that's there now. But I'm curious if people think that would be a good addition.
Well, if it can be maintained, I don't have a problem with it, long as it's maintained, but I really like the walking path because, you know, that wouldn't, you know, no one would be fearful of using that. The exercise equipment, sometimes I see it and I think, well, I'm not strong enough to do this or that. But
Okay.
walking around path, I have no problem with that. But other people, you know, I see a lot of times, I see in other parks, I see a lot of young people using the exercise equipment. So if I had a choice, yes, do both. If you can't, do the walk.
Okay, that's good to know. I like that prioritization. It's helpful. Is there anybody else that has any thoughts? I know that we have a couple of field people, permit people here as well. Is there any thoughts or comments about what's working on the field or what's not? Things that you guys might like to see differently? Not to put anybody on the spot.
I'll speak, Lauren.
Hi,
This
Shoni.
is Sebenice, everyone. Hi. I think just as a resident perspective, since I live directly across from Crawford
Oh, that's
Street Park.
great. Sorry, I thought you were here for a sports perspective. That's awesome.
No, actually, this time I live across the street from the park.
Oh, good.
I honestly think a lot more youth use it. The school and kids really do use it. A lot of families use it. After school, families tend to stay after with their kids and continue using the park.
That's
The
great.
baseball leagues are really active on the weekends. These are youth baseball leagues.
Okay.
I think it would be nice probably for them or some type of visibility to see down to the park. You see a lot of the spectators go down to the park and use the park while they're playing baseball or families.
That makes sense. So
I
some
think
way
that-
for people to keep an eye on the game and maybe other kids that are on the playground.
Correct.
Okay.
I think one of the things for them too, probably more seating. I will say that when they do have baseball games, they are very active. Again, they're youth, so families do come out to participate. I think right now there's maybe 1 or 2 bleachers. So some type of active spectator, you know, seating. Areas, you know, for families to hang out and enjoy the park. I've seen a lot of people use the park to walk their dogs. That's a big deal to people, maybe a small area for the dogs just to kind of close them off because school kids do use it. And a lot of kids do use that path, but there's like the area between the playground and the hill that could probably be possible to put the dogs in a corner.
We did notice quite a bit of dog mess. Might be a good way to put that, while we were on the park, while we were doing our visits. So I would love to hear about that too, and kind of the needs of that.
I mean, I say I own a dog, but there are a lot of people in the community that do walk their dogs through the community, whether early in the morning, you know, when schools are in session, you know, they try to get out there and walk the dogs, especially in the afternoon and the evenings.
Okay.
Big, small dogs. There are a lot of dogs in this neighborhood within a really immediate radius. So
Okay.
I think a lot of people just more go to that park than anything to walk their dogs, just because it's more grass and more space. Not too many people really unleash them. I will say I see a lot of people with leashes. There are a few people that probably do, but again, it's because there's times when the park is just totally isolated or the baseball field's not being used.
Okay.
Okay.
But other than that, like I said, I think it just needs to be a space where families can enjoy. That's who's using it now. Whether I have a backyard or not, we still go across the street and use the park and use the play area. So a lot of the comments that were already made are things that I would just like to see improved, especially lights, because I think it's just ironic to have a sign saying the park is open to 11:30, but yet you can't see anything past dusk. So
Right.
it really
Right.
doesn't help for the kids in the community.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Stephanie, for really great comments. Does anybody else have any other thought? Oh, sorry. Yes, the Francis family. And sorry, can you remind me when you unmute your first name again? I was trying to take notes and I didn't have it. Oh, so does anybody else have any thoughts or any other comments that hasn't had a chance to tell us their thoughts yet? I'm curious about water play. If people have thoughts about water play or what types of water play or any other uses in Crawford maybe that aren't currently there. Hi, Hazel, you unmuted. Did you have something?
Yes, sorry, it took me a while to raise my hand, but
No, it's quite all right.
on the park that's a little further down on Walnut, they have a splash pad, but it's not a pad, it's just like stones. So I'm really afraid for my granddaughter with these stones that are coming out. So if you can do a splash pad, but don't put those big stones, is there any way? I don't know, maybe you have to with the water. But
No,
just, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the newer ones that we do, most of the sprays just come out from the ground. We don't have the big stone bollards anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
And they can be different. They can be like mist or little sprays going in different directions. It's a little more fun than those old ones.
Yeah, and then if they can make it where it's easy for the children to press it, or, I think that might be a good idea, or,
Yeah, some of the old ones are like, even for grownups are a little hard to push. Yeah.
Yeah, I really work to push that one up a little further up Walnut.
Exactly.
Ave, the one at the Hernandez, near the Hernandez Park or whatever park it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And Chevanice, was your hand still up from before, or did you have something else?
Oh, no, just to add to the park space. It would be nice to have swings and the splash pad, agreed. Little kids would love the splash pad, all the things Hazel said, and swings would be really nice in that park. I don't get to Walnut Ave as much, but like I said, I know Crawford Street is used a lot. So just expanding the play area would probably be helpful, especially for the schools.
I was wondering
they come
about
out
that
one
too.
at a time because they can't use it. Like maybe 2 classes probably come out at a time because they can't all be on the playground at the same time, or some kids go to the baseball field and some use the playground. So even expanding that area and adding new stuff would be nice.
That's great. And we did reach out to the school and they were really excited about talking to us about everything. And we are putting together, and we're going to send it out to them tomorrow, some surveys that they're actually going to have specific for the kids to talk about what they want, what they like doing at the playground, types of equipment that they want to see, but also a separate survey for the staff and the teachers about how they use the park, and exactly what you were saying, Chevanice, in terms of, is the size right? Does it need to be bigger? Does it need to have, what else would you like? Are there spaces potentially that you could bring kids out for, like an outdoor classroom space or things like that? Because it is, it's kind of fragmented a little bit in terms of, the way that the park is outlined in or laid out in Crawford, but there are a lot of spaces to be able to do things. So I'm glad that you said that, because that's exactly what we were thinking would be the case with the school that we were asking them about. So it's good to hear. Oh, hi, Marisa. Do you want to go ahead and there we go.
Hi, good evening. And I apologize if you've talked about this, but what about also like equipment, like fitness equipment? Particularly targeting kids. So like at Laviscount Park, there is fitness equipment there at the park. And, of course, it is tailored more towards adults. However, my son has played in that park since he was just from being a baby. And so, he's played on the fitness equipment and, and now is much bigger and can utilize it. And I think that would also be a nice addition to one of these parks, at least to have some fitness equipment for kids.
I think that's a really good point, because when we were talking earlier about it, we were talking about, I think most of the time when we think about exercise equipment, we do think about it for adults. So I think that's a really good point. And I guess when we're talking about exercise equipment, and feel free to put, things in the chat too, if you just want to answer quick questions or comments. It sounds like Crawford might be, if we're going to choose one or the other of Crawford versus Walnut, it sounds like Crawford might be the one to try to put exercise equipment in, and maybe we could do some for adults and some for kids as part of the play equipment. So I think that's a really interesting idea. Thank you, Marisa. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dwayne, you have your hand raised.
Hi, yes. Just to add on to that last point, the Trotter School is another school that is within walking distance of Crawford Playground. The Trotter School is a school that really has no green grass or anything for the kids to play on. And I know they utilize that field a lot. Or particularly with our after school program. I'm not sure what the usage is for during school, but I just wanted to put that on your radar. And then also I love the idea of turf only because, with the shared baseball and other sports, it's that mound in the middle of the soccer field is a tripping hazard. It's tough to do other sports on that field outside of softball or baseball. So I just wanted to mention that in my support of the turf. And even if it's not turf, just to keep in mind the other uses and the other sports that happen on that field.
So Dwayne, just to ask a follow-up on that, are you thinking that then there would be a movable mound if we did turf? Or no mound at all? I guess I'm just trying to double check.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like a colored thing. I just think when you deal with the depth and it's just a tripping hazard. And our kids trip over that little rectangle thing that the pitchers pitch on all the time when they're playing soccer.
Okay.
And I love the idea of, equipment for kids, particularly in that area with the two schools cohabiting that park.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So does anybody else have any thoughts for us? Anything else that that you guys think would be really good in the park, or things that we don't have now? Or, I'd also be curious if there's anybody that has any thoughts about Crawford versus Walnut, like where we were just talking about exercise equipment, and if there are specific things that might be better for one or the other, if there are different age groups that use the different parks. If there's anything like that will help us as we're coming up with ideas for the two, if there are things that really resonate with one versus the other.
How you doing? I believe the Walnut Park has the sprinklers, right?
Correct.
It's mainly on a more of a main street. I would like to see the sprinklers move from Walnut to Crawford, because Crawford has more of a parking lot. It's a little bit more off the main street, and it's a little bit more. It'll be a little bit more private for the kids to be in the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's my main concern with that. Also too, my son has said he would like to see swings in the Crawford Park.
Okay.
But,
and can you remind me, just so that I have it for my notes? I'm sorry, I didn't get it written down earlier. What is your name again?
Kelton Francis.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I'm the one, and also too, the fence on Walnut. My brother has a hand that print that he did when he was in the Ellis school on the fence. So, like when my kids walk by, they like to pick out his hand. So.
That's wonderful. Honestly, like the first time I went to that playground, that was what really stood out to me, at what a special part of the community that fence is. So we're definitely not taking that fence out. We're going to take a look at it, just make sure that it meets current codes. We might need to, there are a couple of pickets that are bent, a few things that we might need to do some repairs on, or some repainting, but that fence is definitely staying.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. Hazel, you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm glad the fence is staying. That's really nice. And also I wanted to know if there was any way so that there's an option for both areas. The parks are not too far apart, but if they could make the splash pad on both of the parks, that would be really nice. Not that they don't have to be the same size, but it's
Right.
nice to have a choice. You don't have to say, oh, we have to go here for the water.
Right.
And then we have to go there for just the swings, If you can give options at both of them, something similar, because, some people live very close to this end. They don't want to go all the way over there. So I think it's really nice if you could do them both, and maybe they could put a couple of trees or something up to make it less visible from the street, if people are worried about the privacy.
At Walnut, yeah. I mean, we have the budget to do both at both parks. So I think that we could easily do that. And like we were saying, we don't want to duplicate it and make it exactly the same at both parks, because that doesn't make each one individual and unique. But the ability to maybe do something different at each, and like you said, maybe one smaller than the other. But yeah, we could definitely do something at both. Dwayne, you
Sorry, this is one last thing I just thought about. So there's a apartment, some apartments in between the Crawford Field and the Ellis School.
Yep.
And the residents there, they love that park. And when we're out doing soccer games, they got their tables set up on the side. They're playing poker. They're playing whatever, but it's all good. It's a nice community vibe. I think if we can get their input on that piece, maybe it'd be nice to add some tables for them to sit down and play dominoes or play cards or whatever it is they do when they see the activities out on the field. But it was just a quick idea that I had.
No, I appreciate that. That's great. I'm not, and I know that we flyered a lot of the residences around there, so I'll double check to make sure that they got the information, and I'll also try to make sure we reach out to them specifically about that idea, Dwayne. That's great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Marissa?
Yeah, I agree with him.
Oh, perfect, Hilton. Thank you.
I think you touched on this already, though, Lauren, in terms of what Ms. Hazel was saying in regards to the splash pads, because I think it's awesome to have just different water experiences for kids, right? So whatever the age group is, that will say, hey, I can go to Walnut for this, and then I can go to Crawford for that. You know what I mean? And so I think that it really would be great to have in both. But of course, certainly different experiences for the kids.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So like I think Megan was saying earlier in the presentation, the way that playground manufacturers talk about kids' playgrounds is like 0 to 2, so like our little toddlers, 2 to 5, where they get a little bit more adventurous, but they can't do something really crazy. And then you've got your 5 to 12s. And I'm curious, do all 3 of those age groups, and obviously we go 12 and beyond too, but just in terms of playground equipment, do all of those age groups use both of those playgrounds, or do does one playground shift younger and one playground tend to shift older? Kelton?
I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and they all use that park.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Okay.
That all ages use all the parks.
At both of them? Perfect. Okay. We just want to make sure so that we don't end up, duplicating things that didn't need to be. But again, what we'll look at and, what we'll come back to you guys with at the next meeting will be a couple of concepts for each playground. And what we'll show is that, we're not going to have the exact same equipment at each one. We're going to make sure that they're different, that they feel unique, so that you know, they have their own identity, right? So that when your kids want to go play, it's that I want to go to the such and such playground or this playground because of the different things. And they're going to want to go to both because they have unique things at each one. So we'll be able to show you guys some of those ideas that are going to come from all of this great feedback that we're getting tonight. And sorry, Megan, I've been answering all of these questions. Feel free to jump in. I'm sorry.
That's totally fine. You know what I think we missed in the actual slideshow was the slide that says when the next meeting is.
You're right. Okay. So do you want to do that? Do you want to take that on?
Yeah. Let's see. There we are.
There we go. Okay. So go for it, Megan.
Oh, I was just going to say that. So like Lauren was saying, what we'll do with all this feedback that we're getting from you guys tonight, which is so great. It's like always so good when a community likes their parks and playgrounds and like has really great ideas. So we'll take all that feedback and, you know, look at the spaces and look at some different, you know, playground stuff and swings and all the things that have been mentioned and start to put together some design options. And they will be schematic, nothing will be definite. And generally when we do that, we try to look at it as sort of a kit of parts. So if we show one option that has, you know, one option may have swings and adult exercise and no exercise equipment. The other one may have the opposite, or, you know, the areas can be switched. I'll explain it all when we get there, but at that next meeting, which will be July 20th, we'll have some ideas for you. So we hope you guys will be able to come to that.
And just to follow up on that, because these meetings don't require registration, we don't necessarily have your contact information for those of you who are on this Zoom. So we will be doing the same kind of outreach for this next meeting that we did for this meeting. But if you want to, I tend to, for everybody that's involved in working with us from the community, I send out my own emails to remind people about the meetings and to let them know what's going on. So for any of you guys that would like to be on that email list that I don't give to anybody else, it's just for this project, feel free to put your email address in the chat, and then that way I can compile those and make sure that if you're interested, that you get that email from me. And I'm going to put mine in the chat, my email again in the chat, so that anybody who would like to reach out, or if you have any other thoughts once we get done with the meeting, you guys can send them to me as well.
Great.
And I'll leave the chat up for a little bit and leave the meeting open for a few minutes just for those who might want to keep putting their email addresses in there. But I did want to just thank everybody again for your time tonight. And this is really great input. Really appreciate all the information that you guys have given us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I got one more thing.
Of course.
Crawford Park is on a historical land. It used to be part of the Abbotsford estate. So I would like to see some kind of just like a little history lesson learned for some people to walk when they walk in the park. They can like read like a plaque about the Abbotsford estate or something like that, which would be nice.
That's great.
Just a history.
That would be very nice. Yeah, something like that. More information is always great for the children to hear and the families to know, and just to know about the neighborhood they're living in. That would be great.
I like that suggestion. Thank you.